You know, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to explain humanity to a hypothetical alien.
Oh, yeah, for
We
sure.
send these golden records into deep space, loaded up with our music, our math, pictures of our anatomy. We really want to put our absolute best foot forward.
Right, the highlight reel.
Exactly. But imagine the reverse for a second. Just imagine an alien actually lands on Earth tomorrow, looks around, and just starts asking us to explain ourselves.
Oh, wow.
Not to explain our math, but our rules.
Ugh.
I mean, the unspoken, completely invisible rules that you and I live by every single day.
It is a deeply uncomfortable thought experiment, really,
Mm-hmm.
because the moment you are forced to explain the arbitrary rules of human society to someone who has zero context for them,
Yeah.
you start to realize just how many of our deeply held beliefs are built on, well, absolutely nothing.
And that is exactly the premise of our duck dive today. We are using a really brilliant academic paper by Daryl L. Durian, which breaks down the hit 2014 sci-fi comedy film PK.
It's a fascinating paper.
It really is. And we're using it to figure out why we build these invisible cages for ourselves. So our mission for you, the listener, is to use this story of an alien stranded in India as a sort of philosophical lens.
Right.
We want to understand how our own deeply ingrained social conditioning actively shapes what we accept as truth.
Okay, let's unpack this because the setup is just perfect.
It really sets the stage perfectly.
You have this character, PK. He is an alien, making him the ultimate outsider.
Ah.
And I was thinking about this like debugging a computer.
Oh, like that.
You know when you've been staring at lines of code for hours and you become completely blind to your own typos?
Yeah, your brain just sort of fills in the gaps.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
you are way too close to the system. Sometimes you need a completely fresh compiler to just find the bugs. And PK is that outside system for humanity.
That analogy works on a few levels, actually. But the most crucial aspect of PK as a, compiler is his absolute innocence.
He is a literal blank slate. He drops onto Earth with no religion, no nationality, no language, and importantly, no caste identity.
He's got literally zero cultural baggage.
None whatsoever. By using a character like that, we get to see prejudice not as some tragic inherent flaw in human nature, but entirely as a socially constructed phenomenon.
We just invent it.
We invent it, and then we actively teach it to each other.
Which is wild to really sit with. I mean, we tend to think of prejudice as this innate human instinct, but seeing it as entirely programmed, it just changes everything.
It really shifts the paradigm.
And the setting for this realization is so rich. The film takes place in India, which has this profoundly complex tapestry of belief and identity.
Well, absolutely.
You have Hinduism, Islam, Sikhism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Jainism all just coexisting. It's a massive living ecosystem of different worldviews.
It is. And within that complex social framework, these different faiths and practices, they often function as rigid markers of social identity.
Like invisible boundary lines.
Exactly. They act as boundaries. So when PK arrives, he is genuinely baffled by the existence of multiple, seemingly contradictory gods and practices.
Because he doesn't see the lines.
Right. He simply doesn't understand the lines we've drawn on the ground. Because to his eyes, the ground is just the ground.
Yeah.
His confusion exposes our tendency to divide ourselves along these inherited ideological lines. He looks at our normalized discrimination and just sees an irrational system.
A system that dictates, who we're supposed to trust or fear.
Yes, who to trust, who to fear, and who we are supposed to revere.
So if prejudice and these societal divisions are entirely learned, does that mean our everyday reliable common sense is actually just accumulated bias?
That is a great question.
Is common sense just the prejudice we've all collectively agreed to stop questioning? Because if I think about PK, it's like he has the pure, unconditioned perspective of a newborn baby.
Right, right.
A newborn doesn't look at a person and see a social status or a religious threat. They just see another person. PK sees the bizarre walls we've built, but he just lacks the conditioning that tells him those walls are normal.
What's fascinating here is that while the newborn analogy is strong, there is one critical difference.
Oh, what's that?
A newborn lacks the cognitive ability to demand logic from the adults around them.
Yeah, that's true.
PK has the full processing power of an adult intellect, combined with that newborn innocence. He strips away the illusion of common sense to reveal the irrational foundations beneath it.
So he can actually articulate the confusion.
Exactly. When a society normalizes a bias, It disguises it as common sense, specifically so people will stop examining it.
Wow.
PK takes these completely ordinary, everyday practices and turns them into objects of intense philosophical scrutiny just by asking for the logic behind them.
If we are all just following these unwritten rules, and if, maintaining these divisions requires us to constantly accept things without question, well, someone has to be guarding those gates, right?
They do.
If I'm blindly following a rule, someone is usually benefiting from my compliance.
And this is where the focus shifts from individual bias to a critique of institutional power.
Okay.
We have to look at what happens when spiritual authority becomes entangled with social influence, massive wealth, and political legitimacy.
In big institutions.
Right. In the context of the story, this corruption is personified by a powerful religious figure named Tapasvi Maharaj.
Right. He is the ultimate gatekeeper in this narrative. He claims to have an exclusive direct hotline to divine truth.
Yes, the sole mediator.
He essentially represents the commodification of faith.
Yeah.
He maintains his grip on society through emotional manipulation, and he demands absolute, unquestioning obedience from his followers.
It's a brilliant illustration of how institutionalized religion can become exploitative. The critique here is aimed specifically at performative religiosity.
Performative religiosity.
Yeah, what happens when an authority figure is no longer subject to any kind of public scrutiny? When power concentrates like that and demands blind faith, it ceases to be about spiritual growth. It becomes a pure tool for social manipulation.
I get stuck here, though, to be honest.
So.
Because I look at my own community, and it's often these exact same types of cultural and religious institutions that are, organizing the food drives, running the shelters, providing a safety net.
Right, doing real social good.
Yeah, they give people a shared moral framework. So are we just throwing the baby out with the bathwater here by saying institutional authority is inherently manipulative?
No. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is crucial to understand that the critique isn't saying all spirituality or community building is corrupt.
Okay, good.
The paper acknowledges that authentic, compassionate spirituality is incredibly valuable. But the conflict between PK and this gatekeeper isn't framed as a battle between atheism and belief.
It's not about whether God exists.
Exactly. It is framed as a conflict between institutional authority and rational inquiry. The target is the mechanism of control itself.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because PK doesn't understand human hierarchy, he can't be intimidated by a person's reputation, their massive temples, or their elaborate rituals.
He just sees a guy in fancy clothes.
Exactly. He sees a man demanding obedience, and he simply asks for the logic behind the demand.
He's totally immune to the pomp and circumstance.
Entirely immune.
You can't flex your social status to an alien who doesn't even know what social status is.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Just because someone sits in a position of authority or wears the robes of an institution doesn't mean they possess moral integrity.
Yeah.
In fact, that unearned authority is exactly what enables manipulation the very second a society decides it is inappropriate or taboo to question the people holding that power.
Which makes me wonder, how does one alien with zero money, zero political power, and zero social influence actually fight back against a massive, wealthy, entrenched institution?
Right.
He doesn't come in with advanced alien weaponry. He does it with literally the simplest tool imaginable. He just asks questions.
And it is the specific type of question he asks that really matters here. There is a profound philosophical difference between how a socially conditioned adult asks a question and how a completely unconditioned outsider, like a child or our alien, asks a question.
Oh, this distinction just blew my mind when I read it.
It's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, because I always thought a question was just a question. But the realization is that adult questions are almost always compromised.
Always.
When you or I ask a question at work or in our community, it's shaped by our biases, our social expectations, our desire to look smart, or, our need to feel safe.
We subconsciously know exactly where the invisible boundary lines are.
Right. So we only ask questions that stay safely inside those lines.
And that self-censorship is exactly how dominant institutions survive. Adult inquiry rarely challenges the status quo because adults have already been deeply conditioned by the very systems they're trying to examine.
We're part of the machine.
Exactly. A child's question, on the other hand, is direct, unfiltered, and driven by pure curiosity.
They just don't know the rules.
Right. They don't know where the ideological boundary lines are, so they accidentally step right over them.
Yeah.
PK asks things like, why do different religions claim exclusive access to the exact same ultimate truth?
Right.
Or, if God made the whole universe, Why do the specific rituals required to please God change depending on what side of a river you were born on?
It's so relatable. It's exactly like being in a massive corporate meeting.
Oh, perfect example.
Right. Everyone in the room secretly knows the new initiative is a total disaster. But adult conditioning keeps everyone dead silent.
You want to protect your job.
Exactly. You definitely don't want to embarrass the CEO. You want to seem like a team player, so nobody says a word.
Yep.
And then the brand new intern, who hasn't learned the corporate politics yet, just raises their hand and asks, like, hey, why are we doing this? The math doesn't make any sense.
And the entire room freezes.
The air just gets sucked out of the space. PK is the intern of Earth. He just raises his hand and asks the most devastatingly simple why.
The fact that the room freezes in your analogy is the most important part.
Why is that?
Because historically, societies deeply resist this kind of unfiltered questioning. It threatens collective stability.
Oh, I see.
These institutions depend heavily on unquestioned acceptance to maintain their authority. They don't want continuous rational validation from the public.
No, that sounds exhausting for them.
Right. They want tradition, repetition, and compliance. PK's innocent questions are philosophically subversive because they completely destabilize systems that rely entirely on our unspoken agreement to just, go along with things.
But if adults are generally capable of logic, why do we comply? Why do we stay quiet in that meeting?
Well,
Because it can't just be politeness holding the fabric of society together. It feels like we're almost being trained, like an animal doing a trick.
yes.
You do the trick, you get a treat. You step out of line, you get punished.
You are actually describing operant conditioning. This is where the analysis takes a fascinating turn into behavioral psychology. The underlying mechanics of these religious and cultural practices align perfectly with the theories of B.F. Skinner from the 1950s.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Taking clinical behavioral psychology and using it to explain vast, mystical, historical religious practices.
It's a bold connection.
How exactly does that mapping work?
So Skinner argued that human actions are learned and maintained through systems of reinforcement and punishment.
Okay.
If you look at the institutions we are discussing, they act as massive systems of behavioral conditioning. They use positive reinforcement.
Like promises of miracle?
Exactly. Promises of miracles, divine favor, community belonging, and ultimate salvation. They use these to heavily encourage obedience.
Right, and on the flip side, they use negative reinforcement and punishment. The threats of immense suffering, divine wrath, being totally ostracized from your family, or burning in an afterlife.
Stick to the carrot.
Yeah, it basically treats the divine like a giant vending machine. You put in a specific ritual or a donation, and you expect to get out a blessing.
A transaction.
Or, arguably worse, it treats the divine like a cosmic security racket. You pay your reverence, you keep your head down, and you do the obedience stance just to ensure you don't get punished by the guy in charge.
And this raises an important question about the nature of belief itself.
Well,
Under this Skinnerian system, people are participating out of deep anxiety and self-interest rather than genuine, autonomous spiritual conviction.
wow.
The rituals become purely transactional, as you said. Obedience is being manufactured not through rational understanding, but through conditioned emotional responses.
So it's not real belief.
The institution essentially creates a profound emotional dependency.
So you are obeying because you are terrified of the stick, or you really, really want the carrot. You aren't obeying because you actually understand or even agree with the fundamental truth of the rule.
Right.
You're just surviving the system.
And again, this isn't rejecting the concept of God. It is pointing out the tragic difference between a sincere spirituality grounded in compassion and an institutionalized fear designed solely to preserve the authority of the gatekeepers.
Which changes how we think.
Yes. When your behavior is driven by fear, your cognitive processes actually change.
If our behavior is being manipulated by this cosmic Skinner box of fear and reward, what does that do to our perception of reality?
It distorts it.
Because if I'm constantly operating out of an underlying anxiety, afraid of doing the wrong ritual or offending the wrong authority, my brain is probably not doing its best critical thinking.
Exactly. Fear makes the brain lazy. Critical thinking requires immense cognitive energy.
It's hard work.
It is. When we are conditioned to feel anxious, our brains look for the safest, fastest route to security. We default to the prejudices and common sense scripts we were taught rather than doing the hard work of seeking the truth.
Which leads to a lot of problems.
This vulnerability causes a massive fragmentation of truth in society. Misunderstanding ceases to be just an innocent mistake. It becomes an active social force.
An active social force, that's a heavy phrase.
It is.
It means our incorrect assumptions aren't just harmless oopsies. They actually do work in the real world. They cause tangible damage.
They do. In the story, there is a relationship between two characters, Jagu and Sarfaraz, that serves as a perfect microcosm for this.
Oh, right.
They don't separate because of an actual betrayal or a loss of love. Their relationship falls apart entirely because of misinformation, false assumptions, and emotional manipulation that they just passively accept as objective reality.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening right now?
Yeah, that's the real question.
The breakdown of that relationship shows us the exact mechanism of how prejudice works. Because of that conditioned fear we just talked about, our brains are desperate for safety.
We want to feel secure.
So when we encounter ambiguous information about an outsider, we don't carefully investigate it. We take the lazy safe route. We view them through our preconceived assumptions.
We fill in the blanks with bias.
If you've been taught to fear a certain group of people, and someone from that group does something even slightly confusing, your brain automatically interprets it as a threat.
And the paper points out that historians have long recognized this dynamic. When we lazily misinterpret facts like this, whether it's in a personal relationship between two people or in the historical record of an entire nation, those mistakes don't just vanish.
They build up.
They accumulate. They calcify into systemic prejudice and deep communal division.
Wow.
When difference is evaluated through inherited bias rather than genuine inquiry, even the most completely ordinary events become highly combustible fuel for societal conflict.
We just stop critically evaluating the narratives we receive, and that is incredibly dangerous.
It's the root of so much conflict.
So how do we fight back against our own lazy brains? How do we break the conditioning?
The antidote, ultimately, according to the analysis, is intellectual humility.
Intellectual humility, just having the guts to admit, hey, maybe the way I've been taught to see the world isn't the absolute, objective, only way to see it.
Precisely. Truth requires openness to dialogue and a willingness to constantly reassess your own assumptions.
We have to keep questioning.
Misinterpretation of reality cannot be tolerated because it compromises the integrity of how a society understands its own identity.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We have covered a lot of fascinating ground today.
We certainly have.
We started with the concept of the blank slate, an alien with zero cultural baggage, showing us that our societal divisions and prejudices are entirely learned constructs, not natural laws.
Right.
We looked at how institutions can corrupt authentic spirituality by turning faith into a commodity and demanding blind obedience just to maintain their own power.
And we then examine the mechanics of how that entrenched power is challenged, right?
Yeah, through the subversive, unfiltered power of childlike inquiry.
Exactly. The simple act of asking why destabilizes systems built on thoughtless tradition.
It's amazing.
We explored the psychological underpinnings of why we comply in the first place, using operant conditioning to see how fear and reward create emotional dependency rather than genuine conviction.
And finally, we saw the fallout of all this conditioning, a fragmented truth where cognitive laziness and misunderstanding act as destructive social forces.
Turning ordinary, everyday differences into deep communal conflicts.
The takeaway here is profound. By looking at human society through the eyes of an alien, we are reminded that inquiry itself, just the simple, stubborn act of asking questions, is an ethical act.
It is the most vital tool we have. Blind obedience diminishes our humanity.
It really does.
It is through critical reflection, intellectual humility, and a refusal to be governed by fear that societies actually progress. We have to be willing to confront the uncomfortable truths about why we believe the things we believe.
And that brings us to the end of our journey today, but as always, we want to leave you with something to chew on.
A final thought.
This thought experiment shows us how an alien perspective can instantly reveal the invisible behavioral cages we all live in. But here is the hard truth.
A difficult part.
There are no aliens coming to save us. There is no outside system going to debug our code for us. We have to do it ourselves.
We do.
So I want you to really think about this today. What is one deeply held truth in your own life that you've never actually questioned, simply because the people around you reward you for believing it?